Homemade lemon pepper seasoning on chicken ribs. If that doesn't get your motor going, nothing will. These seriously are that good, they should be illegal. Is that not the perfect looking lamb rib? All that's left to do is shove them in your face hole. If you love ribs, but don't have all day to babysit a smoker, I've got you. Today, we're smashing out the ultimate hot and fast rib guide. And I'm talking about next level flavors in under an hour. We've got corn ribs, Greek lamb ribs, smoked party ribs, and even chicken ribs. All cooked hot, all cooked fast, and all cooked on a Weber. So, grab a cold one and let's fire up the barbecue. Now, we are kicking things off with something a little bit different. Corn ribs. Just remember they are hot, so give them just a couple of minutes to cool down. Yep, ribs for vegetarians. Oh, let's be real. It's an epic side dish for us meat lovers. Slice your corn into ribs, whack some seasoning on them, and get them into the barbecue until they get that crispy, smoky goodness that you want. One bite, and you'll be questioning every side dish you've ever had. These seriously are that good, they should be illegal. I'm Schuey, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to make corn ribs. You know, if you like this video and comment on it, it helps me out a lot, and it might make you feel really good about yourself. Now just sit back, grab a drink or two, and let's get into it. So if you don't already know, corn ribs are made out of corn. And not only are these tasty, they're easy to make. You want some fresh corn, you're just going to trim it off down at the end. You want to remove all of the husk and the silk. You just do that, get off the last few bits. And that's it, just leaving the kernels behind. Now we just need to trim them up, and you can go all medieval and grab yourself a big cleaver, or using a sharp knife, you can slice each cob through the center carefully, and then halve that again. Pretty easy so far. Put the pen down though, the recipe will be in the description. Next up, we need to give them a good coat of seasoning. But first, we're going to brush on some melted butter. I'm using unsalted. Put some butter on the back side because we can see the kernels here. We want a bit of flavoring on every bit of kernel we eat. Now we need to add some taco seasoning. I'm using this Elk Creek Ultimate Taco Blend. And just shake it on. And like all rubs, I like to do it from a good 30 centimeters above the food. It just allows the particles of the rub to separate before they hit. You get a more even bite. Flip them over, hit this side with some rub. This smells absolutely incredible, this stuff. And I also just like to flip it over and get this edge as well. That's it, prep done. Push these aside and let's get the barbecue ready. Oh, I thought we were getting a beer ready. Waste not, want not. Once the corn ribs are cooked, I'm going to want to put some toppings on them. Some shredded Parmesan cheese, some chopped coriander, and some freshly squeezed lime juice. If you don't like coriander, I get it. Just don't use it. Today, I'm going to be using a 57 centimeter Weber kettle, and I'm going to be pairing it up with a kettle cone because I want to be cooking with a high indirect heat of 240 degrees Celsius and above. How I'll do that is by 3/4 filling a chimney starter with briquettes, lighting them up. Once they're fully ashed over, I'll put the kettle cone in the middle of the charcoal grate and I'll dump the fuel in the middle of it. Now I'll put the grill back in place and I'll put the lid back on, making sure all the vents are wide open, and I'm going to give that grill 10 minutes to warm up. Now 10 minutes isn't long, but it's long enough to grab a drink. The grill is nice and hot so we can get these corn ribs on. Just place them around the outside of the cooking grate. That's where that hot air is getting directed by that kettle cone. That's it, just put the lid back on and wait. Hopefully by now you've subscribed to the channel, and while you're there you might as well hit that bell button. That bell button will allow you to be notified every time I upload a new video. Today we're cooking with a high direct heat of 240 degrees Celsius and above, and the cook's only going to take 15 minutes. Or for those of you who like to use my beer timer, you're looking at a 1 beer cook, unless you count going shopping for the ingredients. 2 or 3 beer cook then. If you didn't know, the Weber lid vent creates a hot spot directly underneath it. So I recommend turning the lid a third of the way every 5 minutes during this cook. Did you know there's a Schueys Facebook page and Instagram account? You do now. The corn ribs are ready to come off now. Just remember they are hot, so give them just a couple of minutes to cool down. Now there may be some of you out there thinking that's a waste of fuel for a 15-minute cook. I recommend adding these to any existing cook you're already doing, especially if you're doing something like wings. You know when there's 15 minutes left, put these on. Everything's finished at the same time. It really doesn't matter what you're cooking. These go with everything. Ribs, wings, roast. Put them on with 15 minutes to go. You're using the fuel that's already in there. Beautiful. Now all that's left to do is to sprinkle over the Parmesan cheese. Don't be shy with it. And now for some coriander, if you like it, and a good squeeze of fresh lime. Now, they look exceptional, but we all know what the most important test is. Wow. These are that good, they should be illegal. As always, cheers for watching. Next up, we're heading to Greece without the expensive flights. How good do they look? Greek lamb ribs, charred to perfection on the Weber kettle. Hit these beauties with a punchy marinade that includes lemon, garlic, oregano, and olive oil. Grill them hot and fast and you've got some next level souvlaki on steroids flavour. One bite and you'll be yelling, "Opa!" louder than your uncle after 3 ouzos. Is that not the perfect looking lamb rib? Having something Greek that tastes this good in your mouth, that should be legal. Oh, smut! Let's get into it. Today we're grilling Greek style lamb ribs hot and fast on the Weber kettle. Now cooking time for this recipe is 30 minutes. Or for those of you who love to use my beer timer, you're looking at a 1 beer cook. Cheers! For a lamb rib video, we're gonna need some lamb ribs. And luckily for me, Mick the Master Butcher out at Gippsland Premium Meats was able to leave his chickens alone long enough to cut me some up. Now we need individual ribs to cook these hot and fast. And if you can only find full racks of ribs, treat them the same way. Rip the membrane off and slice them up into individual ribs. The only prep needed is to get them out of the bag. Cooking ribs as a whole rack is a great way to spend a lazy afternoon. But sometimes I want barbecue now. So hot and fast is the only way to go. It's now time to make our Greek marinade. So grab yourself a plastic or non-reactive container with a lockable lid. And for every 2 kilograms of lamb ribs, you're going to need to add into that container 3 tablespoons of lemon juice, 1 tablespoon of grated lemon rind, 1/4 cup of olive oil, 1/2 cup of fresh oregano, 4 cloves of crushed garlic, 1 teaspoon of salt flakes, and 1/2 teaspoon of coarsely cracked black pepper. Add the lamb ribs, pop the lid on, and shake it up, making sure they all get some action. Once you know all the ribs are covered, put them in the fridge for an hour while we get our barbecue ready. And this will give all those ingredients time to work their magic, and especially that lemon juice, which is going to help tenderize the meat. Today I'm using a 57 centimeter Weber kettle, and I'm going to be pairing it up with a kettle cone because I want to be cooking with indirect temps of around 240 degrees Celsius today. And how I'll do that is by grabbing my chimney starter and placing it in my Weber kettle and 3/4 fill it with briquettes. I'll light up a couple of fire lighters and place the chimney on top of them. Then once all the briquettes are ashed over, I'll place the kettle cone in the middle of the charcoal grate and I'll dump the lit fuel into it. I'll carefully put the grill back in place. I'm now going to add 1 chunk of cherry wood into the kettle cone to give these ribs a nice smoky flavour. I'll pop the lid back on, making sure all the vents are wide open, and I'm going to allow that grill to warm up for 10 minutes. I get a lot of people saying that they are struggling to get high heat out of their kettle cone or vortex. After I chat with them a little bit and work out what they're doing, I find out most people are putting way too much fuel into them and choking them and not allowing enough air to circulate through it. And you need that to happen to get that high heat. Once the grill's had time to warm up, it's time to get the lamb ribs on. Placing them around the outer edges of the grate, as this is where that high intense heat from the kettle cone is being forced. making sure to leave a gap in between each rib. This will just allow for good airflow. Then place the lid back on and grab a drink. If you didn't know, the Weber lid vent creates a hot spot as the cold oxygen is sucked in through the bowl vents up around our fuel and back out that lid vent. So to ensure an even cook, I recommend turning the lid a third of the way every 10 minutes during the cook, allowing space between the food that you put on any barbecue. This just allows the heat and the smoke to get right around it and you get a better flavour. Also, it allows that smoke to penetrate every side of your meat. And we all like good penetration. Smut! We are at the 30-minute mark and the ribs are done. How good do they look? Now just get them off the heat and wait a minute or two before shoving them in your face hole. And don't worry about that, it's not smoke, it's the fat off the lamb. Now, if you're after real deal pork ribs but don't want to wait 6 hours, these party ribs are the answer. We are smoking these hot and fast, no low and slow today. A little rub, straight on the heat, add some glaze and boom! Smoky, juicy ribs in under an hour. If you're looking to impress your mates and still have time to enjoy the party, this is the way you should be doing your ribs. Pork ribs cooked hot and fast under an hour that taste this good should be illegal. I'm going to show you 4 easy steps to smash out the fastest pork ribs ever. We'll cover the prep, the seasoning and glazing and shoving them in your face hole when finished. So just sit back, grab a drink or two and let's get into it. We'll be needing a rack of pork ribs for this cook and baby back ribs are going to do just fine. I rang Mick, my butcher, and asked him if he had a rack I could grab. And he said, sure, you can grab anything you want. Smut! So, rack of ribs acquired. Ribs have a membrane on the back of them. It's chewy and no one likes it. Easy enough to fix, grab some gloves, put them on with a snap, so it looks like you know what you're doing. Using a butter knife that has a nice rounded edge is what I'd normally use to pry under that membrane to get it started and rip it off. But these ribs don't have the membrane on. Step 1 is grabbing a large knife, slicing in between the bones to separate the ribs. And don't forget, just take your time. You don't want to lose a finger. Placing these on a tray of your choosing. Time for some flavour. You can use your favourite barbecue rub at this stage. Today I'm going with 4 Monkeys pork rub. Give the ribs a generous coating and make sure that they're all covered. Notice I didn't use a binder on these pork ribs. That's because pork tends to sweat when you put the rub on it. And then that rub turns into a glaze. Step 2 is setting up your barbecue correctly. And today I'm going to be using a 57cm spherical shaped charcoal burning apparatus and I'm going to be pairing it up with a kettle cone. Why? Because I want to be cooking at temps of 240 degrees Celsius and above today. And how I'll do that is by 3/4 filling a chimney starter with briquettes, lighting them up. Once they're all ashed over, I'll grab the kettle cone, I'll put it in the middle of the charcoal grate and I'll dump that fuel into it. And add a chunk of cherry wood for some smoky flavour. I'll carefully place the grill back in place, then popping the lid on, making sure all the vents are wide open, and we're going to give that 10 minutes to warm up. Once the grill is warmed up, and place the pork ribs around the outer edge of the cooking grate, because this is where that high heat from the kettle cone is being forced. Slam the lid down and grab a drink. It's been proven that drinking while barbecuing creates better barbecue. It's true, because it's science. Cheers. Step 3 is making sure the ribs cook evenly. And if you didn't know, the Weber lid vent creates a hot spot as cold air is sucked in through the bowl vents up and around our food. It is then forced out through the lid vent and that creates the hot spot. So what I recommend is turning the lid a third of the way every 15 minutes during the cook. Time to make some glaze. Into a pot, throw all of these ingredients and heat them up over a low heat, and once everything is dissolved, remove the pot from the heat. These ribs have been cooking for 45 minutes. It's time to get them off the heat and place them into a container. Add the glaze, pop the lid on and shake them up like you just don't care. Pop these back on the barbecue around the outer edges of the cooking grate and pop the lid back on. Today I was cooking with a high indirect heat of 240 degrees Celsius, and all up, this cook took 50 minutes. Or for those of you who love to follow my beer timer, you're looking at a 2-beer cook. Cheers. Step 4 is not to allow the ribs to cook too long with that glaze on them. And after 5 minutes, we can get them off the heat. All that's left to do is shove them in your face hole. And coming in last but not least, we are doing something a little bit different. Chicken ribs. These are the perfect appetizer. One-handed eating leaves a free hand for a beverage of your choice. If you haven't tried chicken ribs before, mate, you're missing out. We're talking crispy skin, smoky flavour, and they cook in half the time of regular ribs. It's like wings and ribs had a baby, and that baby was born delicious. Homemade lemon pepper seasoning on chicken ribs. If that doesn't get your motor going, nothing will. Chicken ribs that taste this good should be illegal. We've cooked beef ribs, pork ribs, lamb ribs. It's time for chicken ribs. So just sit right back, grab a drink or two, and let's get into it. For today's cook, I want to use lemon pepper, and I realise it's not readily available everywhere in the world. Lucky for you, it's super easy to make. Now you will need the zest off 1 large lemon. That's roughly 1 tablespoonful. And to that, I want to add 2 teaspoons of black pepper. Mix this up and then line a baking tray with some baking paper and spreading out the lemon zest and the pepper. Then I'm going to place this into a preheated oven at 100 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes. Then add it to a bowl and we're going to let that cool down for a few minutes. Once cooled, you can add a teaspoon of salt flakes and a teaspoon of aluminium-free baking powder. Mix this up thoroughly and then just pop aside. The baking powder is going to help crisp up the skin of the chicken ribs. Now we're going to need some chicken ribs. So I popped down to see the master of butchery and cuddles, Mick, out of Gippsland Premium Meats. And what I picked up was 1 kilo of chicken ribs. And the only prep needed is to pat them down with paper towel to remove any excess moisture. Now don't forget to flip them over and pat down the other side as well to make sure we remove as much moisture as possible. Don't worry though, after we cook them, they'll still be moist. Once patted dry, add them to a bowl, then add a tablespoon of olive oil and a tablespoon of lemon juice. And then mix that up and make sure all the chicken ribs have been coated in the oil and lemon juice. Then we can add our lemon pepper rub we made. Once again, mixing this up to make sure all of the ribs get some seasoning on them. Then once you're happy and you know that they've all got some seasoning on them, pop them in the fridge while we get our barbecue ready. Today, I'm going to be using this 57 centimetre Weber kettle, and I'm going to be pairing it up with this kettle cone. Why? Good question. Because I want to be cooking at temps of 240 degrees Celsius and above today. And how I'll do that is by 3/4 filling a chimney starter with briquettes. I'll light them up. Once they're fully ashed over, I'll grab my kettle cone, put it in the middle of the charcoal grate, and then dump the lit fuel into it. Ow! Ow! I'll carefully place the grill back in and then put the lid on, opening all the vents, and we're going to let that grill warm up for 10 minutes. If you don't have a kettle cone or a vortex, get one. They're awesome. Or you can push 2 baskets together, but you're going to need a full chimney of briquettes to get the same sort of heat. The time has come to sacrifice our chicken ribs to the barbecue gods of taste and all that is good by placing the ribs around that outer part of the cooking grill, as this is where that high heat is being forced by that kettle cone. Although we are using a high heat, the food isn't directly over the heat source. Therefore, we won't get any flare-ups. Pop the lid back on and grab a drink. If you didn't know, the Weber lid vent creates a hot spot as cold oxygen is sucked in through the bowl vents and up and around our food. It is then forced out through this lid vent. So to ensure an even cook, I've always recommended turning the lid 1/3 of the way every 10 minutes during the cook. Today I'm cooking with a temp of 240 degrees Celsius and above, and all up, this cook's only going to take 30 minutes. Or for those of you who like to use my beer timer, you're looking at a 1-beer cook. Cheers! Now you can push these ribs a little bit further past that 30-minute mark if you really want to, but at that point they are going to be reading 74 degrees Celsius internally. And by now we all know what that means. They will be called no-death chicken, but they're still going to be moist, smut. If you make 2 batches, this is a 2 beer cook. If you make 3 batches, it's a 3 beer cook. If you make 4 batches, it's a 4 beer cook. I think we all know where this is heading. 12 beer cook, woo! The ribs are ready and we can get them off the grill. Let's just take a moment and look at how good they look. Now we're just gonna grab them off the grill, remembering these are gonna be hot. So it's best to let them cool down for a minute or two. There's been way too many burnt fingers at my place from eager beavers wanting my meat in their mouth. Smut! These are the perfect appetizer. One-handed eating leaves a free hand for a beverage of your choice. So there you have it, the ultimate hot and fast rib guide. And if you want more epic barbecue content, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that bell notification button. Drop a comment on which one you're trying first.